3, 2, 1. Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope you're doing awesome. I'm super excited today to talk about a word that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. But I thought, you know what, we might as well talk about it because it's everywhere right now. And, you know, the interesting thing is that we all probably know and have heard this quote that the only thing that's constant in business is change. We've probably all heard that. So I found somebody that really focuses on change and is going to be able to talk us through some of the things that are going on how to change, you know, in your business. So I am honored to hang out with Tony Martignetti. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Dave.
Absolutely. You're the founder of Inspired Purpose Coaching. So tell us what's going on at Inspired Purpose.
Well, at Inspired Purpose Coaching, we're doing a lot of interesting things these days. So not only are we working with people individually on a one-on-one basis to coach them to navigate through change and unlock their potential, but we also do some leadership development programs where we're working with groups and helping them to really develop those leadership skills they need so that they can navigate through change.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So you have a podcast as well. And what's the name of that podcast, Tony?
It's called the Virtual Campfire.
Awesome. That sounds like really, that's like, it's Friday for us taping this right now. Who knows when you're listening, but if it's Friday, then think about how cool it would be to relax by the fire right now. It's totally giving me a mellow, which I really appreciate. So, and you've also wrote a book, and tell us about the book.
Absolutely. The book is called Climbing the Right Mountain, Navigating the Journey to an Inspired Life. And just to give you a quick snapshot of what it's about, is really about connecting with the right path for you in your life and in your career. And not that there's any difference of the two, they're both intertwined. And in knowing that you can always get on the right path, sometimes the path you're on is the right path. You just need to have a different perspective. One of the key things that I love people taking away from this is that it's about defining success on your own terms. We sometimes start navigating our path based on what society says success looks like, or what other people who mean well tell us we should do.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that, I can tell you from personal experience, Tony, that somebody asked me how do I define success? And this was years and years ago. And it's put me in a tailspin for months because I could not answer that question. So if somebody's listening and they're struggling with that, I think this is off script, but it's a great place to start. If somebody's listening and they struggle with that, I mean, if they can't answer, I define success as, and then they easily fill in the blank. Do you have any tools for them, or any thoughts or ideas on how we can kind of, at least start that journey? Because like I said, for me, it was a months and months and months journey until I was able to kind of come to grips with it. So any feedback for people that are in that same spot right now?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things people can do is start by really thinking about the things that you're going to come from a place of, who do I want to be? Connect to the person you want to show up as. And it's not a title. It's, how do you want to feel? What are the things you want to embody as a person? And having that connection is important. But before you can do that, I think the most important step you can do is look back. Look back at the reasons why you got on the path you did in the first place. What are the things that you've experienced that you've really enjoyed? And how can you create more of those things that you've connected with on your path in the future? So there's a lot of time travel involved in this process of looking back, looking at what has brought you joy, brought you, feelings of accomplishment, truly for yourself. And then looking forward and saying, who do I want to be? What do I want to embody in that? And then come into the present and say, okay, so now what can I embody now? What can I do now in this very moment to connect with that person that I am?
I just thought that success equaled stuff, right?
Yeah, we all did.
Right? Isn't that kind of like, man, I don't have enough garages, so let me build another garage to put in to fill the stuff. And
Yep.
for me personally, I found out early in my life, Tony, that that stuff for me, it's okay for other people. That's fine. I just never really, it didn't scratch the itch for me. So then I had to keep going down that, that on that journey, because I was like, so looking back, like you said, what do I want to be? That's like really who do I want to be? That's like really a hard question. We're entrepreneurs, Tony. We're way too busy to be stopping anything
Yeah.
and looking back at anything, right? We're just, all, full speed ahead. So do you find it hard for certain entrepreneurs and certain personality styles? Like, we're both involved in DISC. So like certain personality styles, they're results oriented. They just want to move forward. How do you get them to stop, take the foot off the pedal and look back? That's got to be a real art.
It is, and honestly, sometimes I have to be really demanding, and when I get in a coaching session with someone who's a high D, for those who are in the know, you say, "Hey, look, let's just stop right here. I want to make sure that you understand that all you've done since we've gotten this call is talk, and I want you to slow down, because you realize as soon as you slow down for a moment and really listen to yourself and hear what the voice is that's really behind all of this."
Yeah.
What is it you really want? What is it that you really want to experience in your life? And when you slow down, and the old adage, slow is fast, what you'll realize is that you connect with the things that are going to move you even further than where you are. That's where leverage comes from, is when you can see the things that are getting your way. Are you moving so fast you can't actually see where you're headed?
Right. Wow, that's really good. And the funny thing is that most people are in their comfort zone right now listening, and we're encouraging you to get out of that comfort zone. But in between the comfort zone and the growth zone is that scary fear zone, where we always have these excuses and we're always looking for reasons not to do it. So I'm sure there's plenty of people right now, Tony, listening, that are like, no, can't do it, can't slow down, got to keep going forward, And again, we're not here to say right or wrong, good or bad. We're just here to offer you some advice and feedback. And to start with, if you can't define success in a very finite way for yourself, I feel like you're not real. What's your journey? What's your end goal then? Yeah. If you can't define what that is. I always talk about golf. I don't do it. I'm not good at it, but it's funny, if we went to a new golf course where there wasn't a green and there wasn't a hole, that's kind of like, an entrepreneur in their life without any type of hole. There's no goal. There's no end result. There's no success. I mean, we're standing at the first tee box and I say, go ahead, Tony, tee off, right? And you're looking around like, where am I going? It's like, I don't just tee off, and that's where it's really awkward. So I appreciate that success thing, is a great place to start. So I'm hoping, again, if you're listening, I mean, man, we jumped right in deep quick, which is great. So, but if you can't really define that success, I mean, that's why people like Tony are here, to be able to help you with that. Because like I said, I did the journey by myself and it was really painful. Somebody asked me the question, and it wasn't even like in an intense situation. It was just an off the cuff comment, but it stuck with me and I couldn't answer that question. And it was really hard, and it really was a tough journey. So I appreciate you, for that purpose. So, so I want to transition into the change piece, because, again, we are constantly changing. I mean, our customers changing, our product or service is changing, our company's changing. I mean, everything, the environment, the government, I mean, everything around us is changing. So and this again comes back to DISC, which is weird, because I think there's certain personalities that are easy and to change, and they're open to change. So what has your experience been from that perspective? Do you tend to see that change is easier for some personalities than for others?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's something about that, especially when you start to having to work with different people in the workplace, in groups, and having to spend special attention with certain people. But trying to get everyone going in the same direction is really challenging. So when I'm dealing with people who are hesitant to change, you really have to connect them with that vision of what it's going to look like, what it's in it for them. What is it that you can connect them with the possible future without really knowing. You don't know the future. You don't know how to really say what definitively is going to happen. But it'll give you
wait. You don't know? Wait a minute here now. That's why I'm on this today. You told me, Tony, that you'd be able to use your magic 8-ball and you'd be able to tell us everything. What the heck? But isn't that sometimes what their expectation is? They want coaches to just kind of tell them that. That's crazy. Well, so sorry, I interrupted.
I'm coming back to that, which is interesting because I think one of the most beautiful things about coaching is it's this co-creation process where we're creating that future together. And right. It's one of the exercises I love doing with people. And this connects back to the question you asked earlier, which is I always talk about expanding your vision and narrowing your focus. Okay. Expanding your vision is about creating new possibilities. And when you don't know what's next, when you feel stuck, when you feel as though, there's something ahead of you that you're not sure what's going to look like, well, what if you could look at the possibilities of what this could open up?
Sure.
What are the things that are options available to you? And then when you do look at those possibilities and you see, wow, maybe it's not quite as challenging as it originally thought it was going to be. And then you connect with at least one or two options that you want to explore, then you can narrow your vision, you narrow your scope of how I'm going to focus into that one thing, and just taking one or two steps into that direction. And instead of trying to feel overwhelmed and, feeling this sense of like, there's too many options. Mm-hmm. How do I choose? Instead, you're deciding that I'm going to try this out and see what happens. Move forward, test the waters. And if it doesn't work out, you always have a way to come back.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So expand the vision and narrow the focus. Yes. I mean, that seems like an oxymoron. It seems like something completely, opposite of each other, but like you just explained it, but again, now, oddly enough, I had no intention of talking about the comfort zone today, but it's interesting because how do you possibly expand your vision and not leave your comfort zone? I mean, you can't stay right in that spot where you're at. And, if you believe it or not, it happens that there's this fear zone. We've come up with excuses. There's this little chunk between, the comfort zone and the growth zone. So in order for you to expand your vision, you're going to have to work through those, things that come into your mind that I can't do that. That doesn't make sense. Those sorts of things. So, and then once you get past that, that's where the real growth happens. So I think that's really a cool part of that. So, from the change perspective, when you expand your vision, does change typically happen then at that point, or at least the potential is there?
The potential's there. I think that's the key part. It's the potential, because then there's still a lot that has to happen. There's still a lot of, what if I fail? Like, what happens if, and so you have to talk people off the ledge and say, okay, slow down. There's going to be moments where you may fail. It's going to feel like an emotional roller coaster going from a place that's known to the unknown. And that's why that space in between the known and the unknown of change is a period where you're going to have to be a little more graceful with yourself, a little more compassionate with yourself, because there's going to be a lot of challenges, a lot of growing going on. And so during that process, it's keeping your ears and your mind open and your eyes open to all the things that are happening and looking for the clues of what's showing up. What are you learning? That's the period of being, your life becomes a laboratory of, really kind of saying like, what if I do a little more of this? What is this signal telling me about what I'm going through right now? Should I amplify it? Should I lower it down? And how is this helping me to get to that next place where I'm headed? All of those things are all part of this, what we often call the liminal space, the space between the where you were to where you're going.
Gotcha.
And then it's important to see that as a real important transition that happens between where you are to where you're going.
So I want to try and, if we can, create a real world example in this. Absolutely. Because it's easy for us as coaches to talk in the 30,000 foot level and then try and make people, hey, go ahead, apply it to yourself, buddy. I gotta go. Yeah. Right. So I want to really kind of bring it into a real world example. So what are some things, and again, names and faces stay out of everything, obviously, but what are some things that you've encountered in the workplace, that an entrepreneur listening to could really go, oh, now I get what you're saying? What would you say are some common things that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use an example of a real world example that is pretty current in terms of how things are playing out these days. A lot of people are going through these work transitions, and one of the people I'm working with, laid off from a really highly respected biotech company, and lots of experience, leadership experience, working in the commercial space. Then feeling like, well, the experience I have is not being picked up by the people who I'm interviewing with. And as we're talking, I asked a lot of these questions about okay, so what are the things that you really, really want to have happen in your life? What are the things that you've always wanted to experience? What are the things that interest you? What are the passions that you've had that you've always wanted to explore? And then, as she started dreaming about these particular areas, I had her also look back and say, well, what are the things that you've done in your career that, try to describe the skills and the areas where you've been able to connect the work that you've done in the past and how that could be applied in a new area that you maybe want to explore. And particularly, this was an area that she was looking at was in the food tech area. Okay. And so I had her exploring this idea of going into food tech, but applying her understanding of growing markets in biotech. And slowly but surely, she started to see that the work she was doing in this past world could be applied in a different field. And she started to come from this place of being really anxious and feeling like she was deflated, that there was no way she was going to make this transition. There's no way that anyone's going to hire her. She's been interviewing for so long, to this place of there's new possibilities here. And all I have to do is have these conversations with people in this space and explore this idea. And slowly but surely, she found herself into this area and was able to tell a narrative that had people seeing the value of what she brought to the table, creating a pivot from the unknown of this new industry. They were able to see the value of what she brought by her creating that narrative and pivoting into a new area. And so it makes me happy because, seeing someone connect with a space that really, is a passion for her.
Sure. Wow, that's cool. And I think that, that word pivot, everybody's using it, right? I mean, it's just all of a sudden you're starting to hear these words that we've never really, focused on before. And I know for me, Tony, pre-2020, I did every single thing. Every meeting that I ever did was in person. You drive me in, you fly me in, whatever, boat me in, whatever you got to do. But I had all my stuff in person. And then 2020 March comes along and obviously things change. I was fortunate that a lot of our clients had the, whatever they were called, the essential, status. So they kept on going, but there were some that didn't. And so I had to transition to this thing called Zoom. And I had no clue. I mean, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I mean, how in the world, seriously? I had that. I was in that same spot. I was in my comfort zone and I was justifying and coming up with excuses for why this wasn't going to work. Well, I'm looking at this going, well, I'm going to at least try it. So I at least was happy from that perspective that I tried it. And now I'm to the point where I've transitioned where the vast majority of what we do now is online because it's so much more, it's so easy and effective, to fly to California for a day training, you got to fly for a day, train for a day, come home and fly for a day, and then recoup for a day because, of all that. So it's like a 3 or 4 day deal for one day, and now it's like one day. And so there's a lot of advantages. But if I would have got stuck in that spot, if I would have got stuck saying, no, 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 what would you have done? How would you have helped somebody through that to be able to get them to kind of see whether it's their blind spot that they have, or it's just pure resistance to that change? Because I'm sure you run into people that do resist change when they're just hanging on for dear life to whatever we're trying to get them to change. Is it a lost cause at that point, or what do you do at that spot? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things I think about. I love this challenge. I love this question. There's two things that come to mind. Number one is, what is the one thing about this that you can look at and say that's a positive? What is the one positive upside of this particular change that is on the horizon? Even if it's just one thing that you can connect with. And so that's one area when you start to kind of see that there's potentially a glimmer of upside, then you can start to bridge into that place of, okay, maybe this is something that's worth making the step into. And then also kind of connecting with the idea that what if you just took one step? What if you took one step in this direction instead of trying to make a change that's so drastic where you're going 100%? Sure. But instead you took small steps towards it, like tried your hand at it once.
Yeah.
And try to expose yourself, but don't go all in. I remember having this conversation with a person who had been, asked to come back into the office. And it was at first very traumatizing because she wasn't sure like how other people were going to operate and how they were going to act. And she had trauma. She came in the office and decided to come home. And as I was coaching with her on this, I said, that's okay. At least you made the progress of showing up at the office.
Sure. Yep.
And maybe next time you go back in, you'll make further progress in stepping into that arena.
Well, and I mean, those are exactly how that, it's funny because that's exactly how it was for me, because I'm like, all right, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, what's the positive? Why should I, why would I even want to consider this? And then I started thinking to that point, I got to fly to California. I got to fly home, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I wonder if this could work. So there was that little glimmer of hope, like you said. And then rather than, go and jump off the cliff into, the ocean, which is 100 feet, and then I'm going to learn how to swim that way, you kind of walked in. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to sign up for this free Zoom, thing. It's free. And I'm going to just play around with it, and I'm, playing around with it with people I know and I'm comfortable with, so that's exactly how it works. And so I think that's brilliant. They're so simple, but yet they get you moving in that direction. And I think that's that momentum. Once that momentum started for me, then I was like, oh my gosh, because you're in Boston. I mean, if we were to do this live, I would have had to fly to Boston, meet you somewhere. I mean, that would have been for a 45-minute conversation. That would have been a 2 or 3 day deal. So it's fantastic. So I'm trying to encourage people that are listening, that are something in your life, if you're struggling with a change, to Tony's point, just look at those two pieces and find a positive reason that it could exist in a real positive experience for you.
Yeah.
And just take that one little spot. So do you then help people with that? I'm assuming that sounds like that's really a specialized spot for you.
Well, it comes up from time to time, and it's funny. I was going to add one additional example that I think would be, it's a quick example, but people have asked me like, oh, I have a hard time doing presentations. I get a lot of anxiety. And Well, one person I was working with, I said, look, here's a challenge that I was given by a coach of mine many years ago. Like, start like a 90-day challenge where you just say, I'm going to create a video of myself doing something. It doesn't have to be posted. It can just be like a 90-day challenge of like, get on video and say something, whatever, maybe a consistent message to people about a topic. And you do it for 90 days. And eventually you'll start to get good at what you're doing. You'll get used to it. You'll get used to seeing yourself on video. And then maybe you start posting it. And maybe, you get over that fear of, wow, people are seeing me and reacting to what I'm saying. And when I did this, and I look back, like, cause I remember when I did this challenge many years ago, the first few videos, you're like, oh, I'm kind of embarrassed. It's kind of crazy. But then you
That's
get like,
me? Oh, come on, wait a minute. That's not me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you get to this place where you say like, wow, like, look at how much I've grown. Look at how much I've gained in the process of showing up and doing and just practicing. And it's remarkable when people start to commit to this process of doing the stuff that is scary to them. And then they, before you know it, are becoming the person that they always wanted to be.
And that this can be personal and it can be professional, correct? I mean, this transcends both sides.
Yes.
And it's interesting because a lot of times we might have, it might be easier in one venue than the other. We might be very successful at, personally changing and maneuvering, but when it comes to business, we're not. I mean, my next book that I'm working on, Tony, is about blind spots. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious if somebody's listening and they're going, I don't have a problem changing. It's like, I hear a lot from a lot of people that, like we do listening skills training. And it's so funny because I'm in a group, if there's 100 people in the room and I say, hey, who here thinks they're a good listener? Oh my gosh, half to 3/4 of the room raise their hand. And then we do this, first listening skills drill and they all fail. And then they're all just like, uh-oh, it's a blind spot. I'm totally fine with the fact that you may think you have this when in reality, you may have some of it, but you probably could use, some help on that. Do you run into a lot of people that think that they're fine, they can handle change, they can manage change, but then when they kind of dig into this, you realize that they can't? Is that pretty prevalent for you?
100%. It's like the whole Dunner-Kruger effect, where you think maybe have the name wrong, but where everyone thinks they're above average in something. In reality, if everyone's above average, then who is the average? Who's below average?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
If
90% of us are above average.
Yep. Yeah. Where's that 10%? Those guys are nasty then, hey?
Exactly.
Well, that's how it is. Like we talk a lot about, in my book, I talk a lot about strengthening your team. Well, Gallup says that 2 out of 3 people show up every day to work not engaged in their job.
Yeah.
Okay. And I talk to leaders and they're like, oh my gosh, all my guys are totally engaged. Everybody I talk to. So there's there's this huge company of unengaged people.
Yeah.
But that's so, that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly. So, that's why whenever you have a conversation with like, when I have coaching conversation, oftentimes I'll ask a question and I'll have to like really ask it a couple times in different ways to really get at the truth, because on the surface, there's this element of like, oh, I don't have a problem. I wouldn't call it a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And then after a few more questions, you realize, oh, wait a minute, now they're really getting true to what it is. There is an underlying problem. And it is the exact same thing that I asked initially, but now they're really opening up to what that it really is an issue.
Sure.
We don't want to let the kinks of our armor down.
Right.
There's this confidence that we want to portray a lot, and we have to allow, a good skilled coach, a skilled person who can get into that, person's armor and allow them to see, hey, it's okay. Yeah. I got you. I'm going to help you.
I tell you, business owners and entrepreneurs, business owners, and vulnerability are like oil and water a lot of times. Yeah. We talk a lot about that, because if you can't be vulnerable with yourself, how in the world do you expect your team to be vulnerable? And if your team's not going to be vulnerable, how in the world do you expect your customer to be vulnerable?
Yes.
I just had a bad experience this morning online with something that I was doing personally, and I had to get on the live chat, and their answer was call someone else. It wasn't like fix this for me, because that's me. And my disc assessment says, just, get it done. Just fix it for me. Right. And so, I think it's not right or wrong, but if you're just seeing that all the way through from the customer's perspective. And so I think if you have a blind spot from that perspective, if you're the leader of a group, a team, company, whatever, would you suggest, I'm going to ask it rather than make a statement, because I want to hear your feedback. Yeah. Would you suggest that if I'm a leader and I'm not sure about if I'm good or bad with change, is it a safe thing to ask my team how I handle change? Is that a place to go as a starting spot?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad place. It's also good to, not necessarily have to go to everybody all at once. I mean, you can go to individually to people and say, hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And that's why 360s are really good. Yeah. Like 360s. And one of the things that I've really been embracing a lot is this leadership circle, which is a 360 program that I've been doing a lot of people. And it's great because it really digs into a lot of those blind spots and the things that are getting in the way of us being in our full strength of who we can be. Mm-hmm. But I think it's powerful because, you're getting feedback from people that is really, giving you a sense of the full spectrum, 360, not just from your boss, but also from people, from your direct reports, even external people, if you'd like to get them involved. I think that is the real power of getting that feedback, is to identify those blind spots. Yeah. And just to point out one thing that, I love that you're connecting with this blind spot topic. Yeah. One of the things I've been tapping into recently, and I've been writing a little bit about around this humility advantage, this idea of being okay with, having some humility and seeing it not as a flaw, right? Being humble is not weak; it's actually strong. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it allows you to be open, to think again, to see that when you're wrong, it actually allows you to advance your learning. And I think it's real powerful. It goes hand in hand with being able to see your blind spots.
Well, and I mean, it's so funny because if you are not willing to do that, how in the world, how do you expect your team to do that? If you're leading the team, Tony, and you're, not willing to show any humility. I mean, we do a lot of work with the Ideal Team Player book from Patrick Lencioni, humble, hungry, and smart. If you're not able to be that humble person, I mean, there are certain people that enjoy the non-humble. I don't know if you want to call it prideful, whatever, because prideful sounds like a bad term, but there's there's some strength in being confident in yourself. So I think there's that fine line, right? Of, hey, I'm confident in myself, versus I'm the best and you're not, or whatever the two look like. So, but I think that's really helpful to be able to, ask your team, or ask somebody on your team, ask somebody you trust, let's start there, and be prepared for the answer, because let's face it, we're entrepreneurs. We went into this for certain, everyone's got their own reason, but I'm sure a lot of commonality is, I don't want people telling me what to do. I want to tell other people what to do, right? Whether that stays in your life or not, the longer you are owning your own business. I've been involved in ownership since 1991 in a business of one way, shape, or form. So it just comes natural for me. But there's also, I'm open to have my team tell me, hey, this is what we see. So do you see that as a, from the change perspective, again, if the team's not open, that's kind of where you would jump in. If I was running a team and I really wasn't open, or didn't trust my team, or didn't have a good enough relationship, that's kind of where you would jump in on your side then, Tony, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both. Where, first of all, if you're finding that your team is not sharing with you because you've set up an environment that is not psychologically safe for them to do so, then
Right.
you know you've got some issues.
Yeah.
But also if you're not, as a leader, you're finding that, you're not open up for those changes. That's why it's an individual game. So that's why you have to go at these challenges from many different angles, and also understanding all the different systemic issues at play. And I'll just kind of go off one little tangent to say that, like, this is kind of why I got into this game of being a coach and helping to really change the way people lead in the world, is because I saw a lot of toxic leadership, and I wanted to see how I could help to change the way people showed up as leaders. But then I thought about, like, how best to approach that issue. And I know there's ways you can do it from both angles, because some leaders are not really easy to change.
Sure.
Some are really, reluctant to see things differently. So you have to come from different angles. You have to come from the bottom up, and sometimes from the top down.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Well, and I think as we come in for landing today, on your website, there's a leadership journey assessment. So why don't you kind of share that as because I think that's a free tool that you offer. What will and it's a 5-minute investment of time. What will I learn after taking that assessment, Tony?
Yeah, it's a great tool that for me, I often recommend it for people who coming into my world to just have take the time, go through it, and understand as a baseline, like, where are you on your journey? Where are the challenges you're facing, and where would you like to be? Not everyone wants to be, at a certain place where they're like all 10s across the board. Sometimes it's just a small incremental improvement was all you're looking for. And just knowing that for yourself is really powerful. And then what'll happen is I'll often, when we work together, I'll have people take it again and see where the improvements were made. It is subjective, but I think there's power in it, because you can say, well, how am I feeling about the way, if I'm leading with purpose? Do I feel as though I'm showing up every day feeling more excited and inspired? Those are things that are important to check in with yourself. Awesome. So it's a great tool for that reason, just to have that ability to see, where am I and where would I like to go?
Does it give you then some ideas on how to, if I saw a lack in my leadership, or I saw something that I wanted to improve, does it give you some tips on how to do that? Or is that then where you jump in and kind of help me along?
That's where I jump in. But awesome. I do have a lot of tips on my website, by the way. I have a pretty extensive blog list of interesting tips that will help you along your way. And I also have a tip, a white paper on connecting with inspired leadership. So there's a lot of fun things you can grab there, but nonetheless, I think the best thing once you've taken the assessment is just set up a chat, and it's a free chat. We can talk about the results and go through it and see where we go from there.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. And I don't know what your experience has been on this, Tony, but for me, when I get onto phone with a chat with somebody, there's a lot of times, like, we fix it like right there. It's such a small course correction, like you said. And, it's just a little thing. And all of a sudden, let's try that and let me know in 30 days if it works. And then 30 days, they're like, oh my gosh, this worked really well, whatever it is. So I think that there's a fear a lot of times that we as coaches are looking to, and get you to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, So I think that's where a lot of times people, quite frankly, don't pull the trigger on stuff like this. This is free. Leadership journey assessment is free. It's 5 minutes of your time. And then even to take it to the next level, what Tony just said is he'll sit and review some of that with you for free. So, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think we're fixing somebody today, hopefully, is my plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one thing to add to that, which I think is a point of clarity, is to say, like, sometimes people just need a tune up and not an overhaul of their engine.
Great point. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Absolutely.
Some
people do need overhaul, but
yeah, exactly. Right. And they all, yeah, those are usually the funny ones, right? They come in and think that they're just need a, tune up in the car, and the thing they had to push it in, or they had to, use a tow truck to bring it in. So a couple more questions. I'm going to let you go. So we are both kind of involved in DISC and do a lot of assessments and things like that. So you did a DISC for us before this, which was awesome. When you are involved in that, or you look at your assessment, Tony, is there anything on there that you're like, oh my gosh, that's really surprising, I didn't know that about myself? Is there anything that you've found that you want to share with the world?
Yeah, well, first of all, every time I take the DISC, and I've taken it a couple of times, it's really surprising how it's really consistent.
Yeah.
Every time it seems to be, showing the same similar results, and and it's like magic every time. The amount of information that comes back when you take a DISC assessment, and it's like, how do they know all that?
I know, right? Yeah,
it really is. I find it to be really cool, what comes back. There weren't any major surprises, having been, in this space for a little bit.
Sure.
But it really helps to remind me of the things that get in the way of me being effective.
Yeah.
And knowing that there are ways that, like, I communicate that I need to check myself on an ongoing basis. Even, some people think coaches and, guides and advisors, we have it all figured out.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We still have challenges. So it was a great reminder.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's awesome. And that's the thing, I always wonder, I'm like, I answered, 24 questions or something like that, and 40 some pages spit out. And I look at it and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's me. That's me. And then I look and go, oh, that's not me. And then I have to ask somebody around me and they go, dude, that's you. It's one of those blind spots, so awesome. Well, I'm glad you took it. Thank you. And I enjoyed reading the results. And the last question that I have for you is, what would Tony's tip of the week be for somebody listening? Maybe we covered it, but if you kind of look at this as, what's the tip of the week? What's the one thing that I really want to get, have people come away with in this time? What would that be? Yeah.
If you're looking at next week and you're thinking to yourself, that, I'm not looking forward to next week. Do one thing, change one thing about next week to make it more exciting, make it more inspiring. All you need to do is add one thing to your schedule next week to put a little more spark in it, so that it becomes more connect with who you want to be next week.
Awesome. I was hoping you were going to say, take the thing you don't want to do off your list and not do it.
You can do that too.
Oh no, but oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of like, I do a lot of work with sales professionals and they hate follow-up for some odd reason. And so, people are like, oh, I don't have to follow up next week. I'm like, yeah, no, that's exactly what you have to do now. So awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much for hanging out. If somebody is listening and, they're kind of like, wow, I really want to take that 5-minute leadership journey assessment, they want to learn more about you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, the best place to find me is on my website, inspiredpurposecoach.com. And the second best place would be to go to find me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out mostly.
Sure.
And maybe the third thing I would mention is, go check out the podcast, Virtual Campfire, and listen to a few episodes, and, write a review if you like it. If you don't like it, don't write anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I say. Yeah, if you don't like this, if you love this episode, everybody, then Dave Melenda did a fantastic job. If you don't like it, then you know what? Blame Tony, because man, that's what I think. So no, that's so cool. So inspiredpurposecoach.com. And then on there is a leadership journey assessment button. You click on that. It's a 5-minute investment of time. And then if you want to take it further, obviously connect with Tony. So thank you so much for investing time. Change is obviously tough for a lot of people. It's a tough subject, and we try and make light of it a little bit, just so that it's not so painful, because we all know that change is tough, whether you lost somebody, whether you lost a job, whether your company's pivoting. I mean, we've talked about some really deep things, and so we're not here to minimize those in any way, shape, or form. We just have to kind of lighten the load a little bit, just otherwise it would be so painful to have to go through this. So thank you again for all your feedback, Tony, and can't wait I'm going to take the 5 minutes and do the leadership journey assessment, and I'm going to see where I need to get a tune up. If I need an overhaul, I'm in trouble, I gotta say. So I'm hoping for the tune up. I love that word. So I'm that's what I'm hoping for. So thank you again so much for hanging out.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.